Hello my students of class 8 and welcome back to your e-learning class. Today we would be continuing with the poem that we started in our previous session, that is Geography Lesson by Zulfikar Ghosh. So as I told you already, this poem is about how the way Earth looks from different altitudes of the jet in which the poet is flying. Now in the first stanza that we already did, in that we find out that the poet understands the inevitability of the way the city was built. When he was living in the city or walking in the streets of the city, he found that the entire city was unplanned, haphazard, unorganized. He did not get any pattern in the city. Okay, but the moment he soars up in the sky and he reaches a certain height, reaches a certain altitude, he can see the plan of the city and he can understand why the city has been planned the way it has. That there is a sense of inevitability about the way the city was planned or the city was built. Okay, that means as if it cannot be avoided, as if the plan which has been made, that is the only way people could have survived. Okay, probably the overpopulated streets, which looked much more disgraceful when he was walking on the streets, looked as if there was no other way it could have been done. So he understands that from a certain height. Now the first stanza was all about how he looks at the city and he looks and he understands the inevitability of the way the city was planned. Now come to the second stanza. As I already told you, this poem is about 3 different altitudes which the jet takes up, and it is equivalent to, or it makes the poet reflect upon 3 different kinds of understanding. Okay, he has 3 levels of understanding as the jet takes 3 different heights. So let us come back to the poem. The first paragraph we have already completed. Let's go to the second paragraph, or the second stanza rather. We don't say paragraph in cases of poetry, right? We say stanzas. In the second stanza, the jet reaches even a higher elevation. Okay, it has reached an even higher elevation. So it is not just focused on the city anymore. His jet aeroplane has risen to such a level that he can now see the country. Okay, he can now see a much wider area in a much minuscule or compact fashion. He can understand why the country had cities and where the rivers ran. Where the rivers ran, the cities were built. Okay, now something I forgot to tell you about the first stanza, which is also common in the second stanza as well. The first stanza, you see the first line of the stanza, when the jet sprang into the sky, and the last line of the stanza, when the jet sprang into the sky. So it is the same line has been repeated twice. Remember this. It is to give a certain kind of effect, to let us round back to where we started, to come back to where he had started his chain of thought. Okay, to create an effect on the minds of the reader. Now in the second stanza also we find that the same thing has been done. Let us read the second stanza. When the jet reached 10,000 feet, it was clear why the country had cities, where the rivers ran, and why the valleys were populated. The logic of geography, that land and water attracted man. Underline this line. Land and water attracted man. This is the logic of geography. Okay. Was clearly delineated, was clearly described or explained or displayed through the way the countries looked from that certain height. Okay. When the jet reached 10,000 feet. Then, okay. So, when the jet reached 10,000 feet above ground level, at that moment, he could see the country very well. And he could understand another thing. That is, the places where the rivers are there, he could see that the cities had grown up just near the rivers. This is very much a common knowledge, right? in the ancient times when the civilizations were built up, all the civilizations were built up around a river. Because men or humans were attracted to the river, they had to build their cities near the river because it provided them livelihood, it provided them food, it helped them to make a living out of the river, and it was also used as a means of transport. Okay, so land and water both were good near the riverside, and so all the towns or all the cities were developed or more overpopulated near the river, on both sides of the river bank. Okay, you can observe it from your own knowledge as well. So he understood this. And he says it was clear why the country had cities where the rivers ran. That means why the country, the big countries, had cities where the rivers ran. The big cities were all near a river. That is something which he observed from the aeroplane. And why the valleys were populated. That means in the mountainous regions, he found that only the valleys were more populated because of the better geographic location, because of the availability of food, because of the easy means of transport and communication. The valleys were more populated than the upper sides of the mountain. Okay, the valleys had more scope for a livelihood of the people, and so he could understand that the valleys were populated more. And he could understand that it's a logic. This is the logic which he got. He got the geography lesson as he was traveling on the aeroplane. This is the logic that he understands. The reason that he understands is that men were attracted, not men, humans, people were attracted towards places which provided them a means of livelihood, a means of communication, as well as provided them food and shelter. It was easy for them to make a livelihood in such places. And he could also understand why the logic of geography, what the logic of geography was. That is, that land and water attracted man. Underline this line. This is the logic of geography which he understands. That is, land and water attracted man. Was clearly delineated when the jet reached 10,000 feet. That is, when the jet reached 10,000 feet, this feature, why men were attracted, why humans were attracted towards land and water, this was clearly shown or explained to him because of the new height which the aeroplane or which the jet aeroplane took. Okay, so this is the second stanza. I think you can understand or you can follow the class. If you can't follow the class, any kind of queries you have, you can interact with me. Okay, so we will continue with the next stanza in our next session. Okay, so read these two stanzas on your own and find out what difficulty you find in understanding the lines. Try to explain to your own self as you read the poem, and then only you can understand if you have understood it or not. Okay, so till then, study well.